Hey everyone, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We're in season 10. I think we've got like 340 episodes or something crazy like that. So if you are one of the folks that have been with us from the very beginning, then so glad this continues to add value to your life and your work. If you are new to the podcast, then we've got 340 episodes. So all you need to do is Google my name, Jason Barger, and whatever topic you're looking for as it relates to leadership, culture, emotional intelligence, trust, accountability, whatever it is you're looking for, chances are you're going to find something that hopefully resonates with you. And also, you're going to stumble into, and today's episode will be very similar to that, is some amazing guests that I've been fortunate to have, friends and thought leaders and folks from around the world that have joined me to talk about the temperature that they hope in their life and that they're trying to set, and to think about this developing of people and culture. My commitment to you, the listener, of course, every time I go to record one of these, is I want to make sure this is an opportunity for you to step back, to have some good oxygen breathed into you, and to think about that temperature that you are aiming to set in your life and your work. And today's episode will hopefully do that same thing. If you'll do me the quick favor, I keep being reminded of this, got to keep saying it, subscribe if you haven't done that, rate the podcast, of course, 5 stars on whatever platform you're on. If you'll leave an authentic review in your own words, evidently in the world of AI chatbots, that's really important to have authentic reviews out there, your own words, so whatever platform you're on. And then certainly every time you share episodes that resonate with you, that amplifies to other people. So if there's an episode on social media or with your colleague or friends, hey, let's listen to it, let's talk about it. That helps amplify these messages, and that's the whole point. So thanks for spreading good stuff in the world. I'm very excited to invite my guest for today into this chat in just a minute. DJ DiDonna is a senior lecturer of business administration at Harvard, at the Harvard Business School, where he teaches MBA courses on entrepreneurship and building meaningful professional and personal lives. He has spent his career translating social science into real-world tools for positive change. In 2019, DiDonna founded the Sabbatical Project to define, explore, and research the role of sabbaticals in modern life. He has helped organizations around the world, from nonprofits to Fortune 50 companies, design and implement sabbatical policies. His work has been featured in the Atlantic, Harvard Business Review, Time, Fast Company, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and many more. If you've been a loyal listener to this podcast and followed my work for some time, then you will know that I'm a big believer in the power of sabbaticals to promote creative thinking, deep rest, strengthen relationships, and the connection between life and work, and to improve performance in all the ways that I'm sure we'll dive into today on today's chat. So it's my great pleasure to have DJ DiDonna as a guest on the Thermostat podcast with Jason Barger. So welcome to the pod, DJ.
Great to be here and good to meet you.
Yeah, buddy, this is great. I'm glad we have connected, and good to know of the great work that you're doing, and that it's fun to be able to highlight you and highlight this, because there is, as I've shared with you, great synergy to the work and the things that I talk about and believe in. So glad you're here, man.
All right, I want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, before we get into this, Tell us something, if you'll tell the audience. Tell us something. I mean, I just learned something about you a minute ago before we hit record, but tell us something about your life that we wouldn't know from that amazing bio I just read.
I think at the end of the bio, it talks about what I did on my sabbatical, which is I did a 6-week Buddhist walking pilgrimage in Japan. But I think, some of the most important things about my sabbatical and my life are, not on the marquees, right? So it's not the lecture at Harvard Business School. It's, on my sabbatical, I took care of my mom for a month, and I rediscovered my love for kind of songwriting and singing. So I sang in college, and it's one of those things where, I don't know if you had this experience, I know you're an athlete, which is maybe the opposite of a singer in college, but where you have this like passion and you put so much time and effort and energy into it, and then just kind of slides away. And for me, it took this kind of reorientation towards that, and a lot of like space and openness to dive back in that. So roundabout way to say, I guess, I sang in college.
Well, I heard a lot more than just that, but yeah, you sang in college, but also just, again, we're going to talk about the power of sabbaticals, but that time that you clearly have honored in your own life, time to get away, time to think deeply about something, to take care of your mom, to do some things that recharged you. You're on the Thermostat with Jason Barger podcast. So a question that often when I have guests and beginning this conversation, we talk about the thermostat. Oftentimes we're talking about the temperature that you aim to set in your life and in your work. And mean by that is proactive. Like we're all imperfect people. We know that there are imperfect teams and organizations. Of course, no place is perfect. And yet what we find is there are places that are more intentional. There are people that are more intentional. And so not perfectly, but we all have something at least that we're aiming for not just what we do, but how we show up to do it. And so how would you, you just had a new child, a first child, which congratulations to you. You've got a new book coming out, which we're going to talk about today. But for this stage of your life, how would you articulate the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work?
Yeah, it was interesting learning about this metaphor and learning about your work a little bit more. I think it's super prescient, and I think what we learned in the sabbatical research is that the majority of sabbaticals, over 2/3, happen because it happens to someone. So some sort of crisis forces them to kind of recalibrate, whether it's a job crisis or relationship crisis or health crisis. And so that's kind of how I entered sabbatical land around 10 years ago, was like a bit of a work kind of burnout, relationship. And so, long way to answer your question, which is I try to be more intentional about thinking about lives in chunks. So like setting the thermostat, if you will, for a particular chunk, running it based on an experiment that I'm doing and a hypothesis that I'm addressing. Because I think if you don't have chunks, if you don't have inflection points at which you look back and review your life choices, think about what you'd like to do in the future, it just becomes a big run-on sentence, right? So I think the thermostat and kind of like the experiment I'm running right now is, what would it be like to write a book? What would it be like to teach? So I came back teaching 4 years ago based on some reflections I had when I was on sabbatical, which is, what were some of the most meaningful moments from my startup career, which was, the previous 8-year chunk. And it was really helping some of the young folks in their career find their way. Some people, enjoyed the work they were doing with my company. Other people were like, this is fine, but I want to do something else. Yep. And I think being a part of that journey, no matter how small it is, was interesting. So the current kind of, setting is, do I like this? Am I good at it? Can I be great? And it's not a forever job. It's a chapter. So I'm in the middle of that. And I think especially in such a time of kind of like blooming and blossoming with the book and with the kid, I'm really just trying to be present before I think about anything else.
I love that. Yeah, to be present and I love the idea of using it as kind of an incubator for whatever that idea is that you're thinking about, or and to think of it as chunks and chapters, I think is a good way to do it. So let's start with that word sabbatical, because again, I know what I think you mean by that, and I certainly, as I've shared with you, is I've been practicing this myself for many years now of giving myself time to get away, space. But tell us, the terminology around sabbatical, if somebody's listening to this and they're not, what's the difference between that and a vacation? How do you articulate that just as a starting point for this conversation?
When I started, I felt like there was no definition. I'm curious, did you call it a sabbatical when you started taking this break?
I did. I did. And that was, not for any research that I did, but my own internal gut. This is not a vacation, and this is not just about having a trip, and it's not just about not working, but it's a very purposeful time away.
Yeah.
For a whole lot of things that I think we'll get into, but
yeah.
Let me let you talk.
Yeah, no, the reason I ask is because, I personally don't love the term sabbatical. I wish we didn't have to use the term, because I think the reason we have to use it, and to what you just said, is that we feel like we need permission, and it gives lends a little bit of prestige, right? Like the sabbatical comes from like religious roots around kind of the Sabbath, right? But also from academia, where you're on sabbatical and you get a chance to step back from your teaching and then focus on your research.
And you typically earned it, or it's been a part of your compensation and all that. Right? Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
And, ironically, so the first sabbatical policy was created at Harvard in the late 19th century. And when I went through the record books and like the notes of the meetings to figure out why, they'd originally set it out as rest, recovery, and the pursuit of study, right? And so this concept of rest, even within this academic context, was the primary context, right? Whereas now it's more like you set aside a couple of your jobs and you do research, which is really how you get kind of promoted and evaluated in a place like this.
Yep.
So anyway, when I took my sabbatical, I called it a sabbatical as well, because it lends this kind of prestige or this identity to a time which can be, for many people, quite confusing, like a vacuum of responsibilities and roles. And, it certainly sounds better than saying, like, I have no idea what I'm doing next, or, I'm traveling around, you wouldn't understand, or I'm having a hard time.
Yep.
And so, all that to say, when I started the research, I was trying to figure out, why do people call it a sabbatical, and what should this thing for non-academics mean? And what we came up with is extended leave from routine work on purpose. And so extended meaning, as you say, longer than a vacation,
Yep.
Ideally measured in months, not days or weeks. And then stepping away from your routine job. So that doesn't mean that you can't do any work. And some people, step away from their job to write a book or get yoga teacher certified or whatever might look like a job to someone else. I remodeled my kitchen, right?
Yep.
That doesn't sound fun to most people. But because it's work that you're choosing, it's intrinsically motivated, you actually get more fulfillment out of it, right?
Yep.
And then on purpose. So it doesn't mean that you have to choose to be on sabbatical, because, like I said, a lot of people wait until it's too late and a sabbatical happens to them. But whenever you leave an identity, a job, you have to choose to stay in that liminal space, that space in between two identities intentionally. And that's where you start to get a lot of the identity change and a lot of the good stuff that I found from my sabbatical, and then we kind of discovered in the research as well.
Yeah, I love it. And what I would say is, I started calling it a sabbatical, not because I guess there wasn't another term that maybe I can use that. But also, admittedly, in a lucky position where I was starting my own thing, and if you're the boss and you're the starting of your own thing, then you have an opportunity to write this in as this is a part of the ethic of what I do.
Right.
And yet, though, the purpose of it was not, again, just to get away. The purpose of it was baked within that, and that's probably why I call it a sabbatical, was that rest, that recovery, that breaking routines and allowing my brain to kind of have margin to think about things. And so that has become, for me, a practice every year that helps me, and I'm convinced of it, which we'll get into here, of I want to know what the research would tell us, what the benefits of it, but I'm convinced of the way that I've seen the benefits of that for myself and certainly my life and my work. But you probably as well as anybody, this stat or around this stat, but that every year in the United States, about 768 million days of vacation go unused, which equates to about $66 billion of lost benefits that people have. And a lot of it is because we're in this kind of busyness mode, and we've bought into this myth that busyness equates to effectiveness, which my listeners that will resonate with that this kind of like, I'm the first one in, the last to leave. And yet people are, by all accounts from research, exhausted and tired, but they feel like they can't possibly take time off. And it becomes this kind of badge of honor. And yet I've experienced it as such an enhancer of my life and my work. Respond to any of those statistics, or where does that fit into any of the research that you've been doing?
It's all from the same river, right? So you can talk about the disengagement crisis. You can talk about burnout being a, World Health Organization global phenomenon. So it's all true, right? And I think the scary thing about those unused vacation days, and I love that stat, is We're already, as Americans, one of the highest income country that vacations the least. And I think in the past, the mark of a successful society or a successful like upper class was leisure. And so like leisure use was this thing where if you made it, then you could have a country home and things like that.
Yep.
And now, the upper class are some of the folks that are most likely to not use vacation days. And so everything's just a bit upside down. I think in what you said around, taking this kind of annual sabbatical and how it helps you, one thing I talk about in the book is, people will obviously come to the book and come to arguments like this with their business hat on. Will it make me more productive? How much? What's the minimum amount of time I can do it in order to get the benefits? That kind of thing.
Yep.
And so, and I have a couple chapters devoted to that. That's why I did the research, was to kind of put some academic rigor behind this feeling that anyone who takes extended leave feels, which is there's something profoundly different from a vacation. And it's really getting to changing your identity and changing and informing your life in the future in a way that a vacation never could. But the other hat I ask people to put on is just, what if everything about your life is exactly the same or a little bit worse? What if you earn the same amount of money? What if you earn less money, 5% less? But you get to have these experiences in your life that change the trajectory and inform kind of who you are. So one of the things in our research we found is that the way people talk about their sabbatical and the impact it has is akin to what's called a peak life experience. So the birth of their child, their wedding day, like these things are inflection points that inform your future life. And also you look back on as like very memory dense, right? Like your life is never the same. And so, we can talk all day, and I can give the business argument around like creativity and retention and, key person risk, and all the kind of benefits that you can do as a company. But really circling back to the one word we heard over and over again, which is feeling human again. And, I don't think anyone is like, I want to go on sabbatical because I don't feel human enough. But it's this word that based on what you do and how you experience and how you feel when you're away from your kind of work identity long enough, it just starts trickling up. So I think that's kind of what I would say is just the ability to feel human again.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about it. Just did a great episode with Marcus Buckingham, and he and I were just talking about this concept of love in business and love in our work and love in our life. And a lot of it comes down to just this kind of loveless feeling that humans are feeling in their own lives. And there's all kinds of research and mental health and all the stuff that you named earlier that would point us in that direction. But also within organizations of the, we're at a 10-year low in employee engagement, very low trust levels in organizations. People are wanting connection and not feeling it. And so helping people, part of those benefits, and the reason why I asked that question is because what I experience each year is it is a time for me to kind of recharge, is the way that I think about it. And it's a recharging of getting away and breaking those routines. And the outcome is I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better friend. And also, it gives me time to reevaluate my work that I'm doing in the world, to think creatively about something. And when I first started doing them, a lot of the pushback I got from people around was like, but aren't you, like, couldn't you, make more money? Couldn't you be doing more speeches? Couldn't you be, be with clients more? Like, aren't you just... And I said, that's not the point. The point is the quality of the work and the quality of the person gets better. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing that same impact in the research?
Yeah.
People have?
Yeah, a lot of the same terminologies, and I wanted to hit on a few terms here. So, recharge, right?
Yep.
One of the folks, the protagonist of chapter 1, talks about how, we use these kind of terminology around machines, right? Like recharge, like a battery. You recharge your phone so that your phone can do phone things, right? Your laptop can do laptop things. But just how dehumanizing that sense is, that like we are humans and we need to recharge so that we can like expel our energy
Yeah.
as opposed to like, and I think the way that you talked about it, you didn't say like recharge to be productive. You said recharge to give energy to family and to friends. And I think that's exactly how we should be thinking about it.
Yeah. And just to complement that is the way I talk about a recharge is, it's not just so we can do more, which that's the productivity trap and the thing. But a recharge for me is the saying it's about the quality of who we are and the life and work we're choosing intentionally to pursue.
Yeah.
And from that, I don't want the battery to get depleted of this kind of authentic living and work. Is that a better way to maybe describe it?
No, I think the word is totally fine, and I think that's like a very kind of elevated way to think about it, and I think that's exactly right. It's like I think about it both as like how far, or how fast, or what's the quality of your movement, and then also a sabbatical is helping you zoom up to say like what's your perspective on which direction you're heading, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think if you combine those two vectors, then it becomes very helpful on like you need energy, you need vitality, you need like health and creativity to go do anything, whether it's going back to your job that you don't really love or striking out on your own and creating something. So that's obviously a necessity. And the question just is, do you have the perspective around where you're going? And is it the same as you've been going, or can you use that inflection point and that pause to actually go in a different direction or go in a different way? One thing we found in the research, we talk a lot about burnout in our society. Like burnout, it's a bit overused. Many people don't know exactly what it is. But it also kind of feels like an end state. Like you burned out, right? Whereas I think what we found, I call functional workaholism, which kind of borrows from functional alcoholism, where someone might, appear to be functioning quite well. But actually like inside they're kind of like rotting away, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I think this functional workaholism, it's tough because it papers over how you actually are feeling as a human, your quality of health, your quality of relationships, your quality of work. And until you pull yourself out of that soup for long enough, you heal and you actually realize that the way that you were working and living was just probably not the healthiest and not the way you'd like to continue. But as human beings, we're wired to just like continue to avoid risk and change. Those are scary things.
Yep.
And so it really requires a fair amount of time, which is why, in our research, people would say it takes, up to 6 weeks to really fully feel detoxed and, have their work identity kind of drop down so they can really see who they are again, right? It takes a lot longer than we want it to.
Yeah. Where is there, because I know people ask you that all the time, is there a sweet spot that the research would point to that, again, not that I'm not trying to make this sound like just a health and wellness hack, but is a again, I know, and I think my answer would be that it's going to be personal and different to different people based on personality type and a whole lot of things that we would throw in there. But I know for myself, 2 weeks is not enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when somebody says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do a 2 week," that's more of a vacation to me.
Yep.
And it doesn't allow your brain enough time to let go and get into that space and then go up. But where does the research say?
I think ideally you want 3 months or more. I think that, I took 4 and it flew by. It was also the longest, I hadn't taken more than 2 weeks off since middle school, right? I mean, I worked all growing up. And though I will say, I don't know when you typically take your sabbatical, but like the summer is the most socially acceptable sabbatical, right? Yep. Like we maintain this tradition, even though it's totally inconvenient for parents to have their kids out of school. For kids, there's learning loss called the summer slide. Like it doesn't make any sense at all, but for the fact that we had amazing memories growing up, right, during summer, and I don't think we want to deprive our kids of that. So it's another example of like when you really believe and value something, even if it's not like productive, we find a way to make it work. But yeah, I don't want to discourage anyone for taking less time than that. I think that these periods of extended leave are kind of like gateway drugs.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty positive that like if you took 3 weeks off, you'd be like, oh man, I was just really starting to get the hang of it. And the next time you take 6 weeks and you're like, oh my gosh, like that was amazing. And so I think experimenting with what it's like to take a longer period of time, but knowing that like in order to really kind of disconnect and to experiment with other ways of living and truly kind of like dig back into who you are and who you want to be, it takes a long time. It's an inconvenient fact. The other thing I would say is that the difficult part about taking those shorter breaks, and I've heard the term like micro sabbaticals, that kind of stuff, is that one of the things that's enabling you to have this transformative event is when you're on vacation, you have a script running in the back of your head, which you know that your work is continuing to pile up, right? And when you get back, it's going to be a gigantic mountain of stuff you have to deal with. When you're on parental leave or when you're on sabbatical, like you're gone for so long that you have to give the jobs to other people in your organization.
Yep.
Or if you work for like they just don't get done, right?
Right.
And so that allows you to like shut that script down in the back of your head saying, and you can truly say like, I don't have any work to do right now, which I think allows you to kind of open up and enter into another different mindset. So, I talk about like, the best practices of taking a sabbatical being like duration, like length, disconnection. So how disconnected are you from routine life? And then experimentation. And I think you can definitely do those in a shorter period of time. And I think when you do that, you're gonna realize like this would be enhanced significantly the longer I could take.
Totally. Yeah, no, I that all of that resonates with me. And again, before even having the terminology for it or backed up by research, what have found is, again, there is that disconnection piece that is really important. There's that rest and just breaking routines and having margin to allow my brain to kind of wander. Mm-hmm. I always give myself a little, like, there's small little things. Like, I remember one year it was like, I'd never made a really good homemade spaghetti and meatballs.
Ooh.
And so I was like, I'm going to take the time to do that. Or when my kids were young, they wanted a tree fort. Like, what if we designed and just built something together? There's always a component of going away, not, again, just a vacation, but to just, again, part of that disconnection, the breaking of the routines. And in that, there's thinking that happens, that the brain reboots, which, again, I know is all backed up in science, too.
Yeah, I love the tree fort example, especially. There's certainly a way to build a tree fort, one weekend at a time, but there's something about like really immersing in the problem and like studying the best tree forts and picking out the materials and making it a project. One of the protagonists in the book, they spent a year living at this island above the Arctic Circle in Norway. And the mother was using it to get back into her career because she had stepped away for 5 years to raise the kids. And the father was using it to kind of disconnect from his. And he would spend these afternoons they had 2 kids, with 1 kid at a time, what they called daddy days. And, it was this unique time to spend time one-on-one with the kids, to give them kind of special individual attention. And, really just do creative projects. And it overflowed back into their life when they returned home to Boston, where, they had all these cool experiments. They made this timer that showed you exactly when the bus was coming outside their street. And so just like it gave this kind of creative energy to the family that if your kids are just a list of responsibilities and chores and places they have to be and things like that, you don't have the space to really engage in it that way.
Yeah, and to me and maybe this is back to the root of the word sabbatical, but to me it's a practice. Mm-hmm. It's allowing your brain, your soul, your heart to like just be present where you are, and to know that it's the most important thing in life isn't the work, isn't the meeting, and yet there's space then to think about those things in a way that when you come back to it, you are recharged in this way that is meaningful and makes the quality better. That's at least the way that I think about it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, listen, I can imagine some of your listeners are rolling their eyes around. Here's two sabbatical guys that are just talking about how great it is. Like, what when you tell people that you do this, do you reserve that story so you don't tell it very often, or are you pretty public about it? Because oftentimes when people run their own business, or their business and their work is around their own brand, it's really hard, or the perception is that it's super hard to do this. And so, do you talk about it openly? Do you not make it kind of the marquee part of you? Like, how do you justify it to folks?
Yeah, I think the people that know me best and are around me, I mean, clearly, like, I'm not shy about it. We're doing a podcast about it. And I'm sharing you and these ideas and I write about them in books. So I'm certainly talking about them, but I wouldn't say that I'm out there broadcasting it everywhere. But when people ask me and the people around me, they know it's just a part of my practice. And I have rituals throughout the year that, again, I'm not doing just for the sake of doing them. I'm doing them because I truly believe it helps me stay focused and centered in that temperature that I'm hoping to set. And so I talk about it, and I talk about that it helps me be better. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the biggest objections that I hear is either logistics. How could I put aside my mortgage, or my kids are in school? Finances, right? Like, how could I afford that?
Sure.
Perceptions. What will people think of me? And to me, once you normalize something, I mean, first of all, the best way to overcome a lot of those objections is not thinking about it. Can I take a sabbatical in the next year? Almost no one can do that, right? It's, what am I doing in 2031?
Yeah.
Right? And just saying, like, okay, this might take me a fair amount of time to save up for. It might take me a fair amount of time to fit all the pieces together logistically. But if you just act and live as though this is your life and this is the schedule that everything else has to flow around, it's much more easy, right? And so if you're leading with, and again, I don't know the details, but yeah, sorry, I can't take on that talk in July. Like, I'm gone in July.
Yeah.
And people will be like, okay, how about August? I mean, it's just, you just make it the norm, and then folks will kind of flow around you in the same way that this concept of parental leave, the U.S. still has a long way to go. We're the worst kind of high income earning country on paid parental leave.
Yeah.
But we've come a long way in 40 years. And I think most people, when you apply for a job, if they don't have paid parental leave, it's kind of a head scratcher, right?
Yep.
And so when someone goes on parental leave, it's inconvenient, but the organization figures out a way to get the job done because we've said, this is what we're going to do. It's important.
Yeah, and I recognize certainly when you start talking sabbatical, people can think, oh, it's just for the privileged, it's just for the people that do that, or they're in academia and there's some system already set up. And yet it's fun to talk to people then about what if that was also tied to our performance. Mm-hmm. And what if we begin again to challenge the thinking? And so in my most recent book that I wrote called Breathing Oxygen, I talk about and I reference this kind of thing because, and I've shared with you that I think in the next decade we're going to talk about, when we talk about leadership and we talk about performance and we talk about cultures, I think this idea around personal biorhythms, understanding even on a daily basis of how the rhythm of us, and then how do we cultivate that throughout a day and throughout a week and throughout a year. Mm-hmm. And part of that, a sabbatical is just one piece of that. But that, in my opinion, is going to become more commonplace because we're starting to have a better understanding that, again, the adage of just the faster you run, the further you get, we're just seeing that not to be true.
Yeah.
And more, and so I think we're going to get better at tying this to performance. And so that, again, in the short term, could you make more money? Are you spending money? Well, yes. But in the long term, the quality of your life and the quality of your work gets better. And my prediction is that's going to become more commonplace. And organizations, I think, are going to get more creative with their structures because they know their people want it and need it.
Yeah, there's a lot to react to there. I think one thing Warren Buffett talks about how time is the friend of the great company and the enemy of the mediocre.
Yep.
Where I do think that, unfortunately, a lot of leaders are put in this position where, like, yes, it's inconvenient to have someone leave for 6 months, right?
Yep.
But if that person stays 50% longer, does better work,
That's right.
if it's something that's an equitable, benefit, unlike parental leave, which, parental leave, you're not on vacation, right? You're just swapping out work for caretaking. But it's not even equitable. Like, only the people who choose to have kids take parental leave, and then everyone else who's still at the company carries water for them, right? With a sabbatical, you're carrying water for someone else when they're gone, but you get that as well. And so it becomes this like equitable benefit. But you have to be willing to look at the company over a medium-term perspective, as opposed to just, will it be difficult in the next quarter? And the answer is, probably yes. But you also have to compare it to apples to apples. Like, people might leave, and then things are going to be they're going to be difficult anyway, right? So you might as well forecast that someone's going to step away for a while, transfer their responsibilities, and pick them back up, and build that muscle around turnover, because that's inevitable. The other thing that
I see. Sorry to cut you off, so don't lose that thought. But I want to get to that, because what I'm also seeing is again, back to burnout, back to people organizationally. When we think about the cost of turnover and human capital in the world, the number of people that you see that just leave a job because they don't feel like there's any next option, and that's their excuse then to get away. And yet, if the company and the organization was thinking more proactively about, this is a talented person, somebody that we've already invested in, that does quality work, that we want to care about them as a human being, that why would we not get out in front of that and help them, so that so many of the people I see, they would come back and their experience would be different. Yeah. But instead they just have to jump.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, what we found is that over 80% of people who are offered a sabbatical policy return to the job, right? And so this concept that you're giving someone a golden parachute and they're taking off, I think is not correct. And also, when I was working with like a tech company on developing a policy, their head of talent was like, if you give someone a couple months off and they leave as soon as you let them off the leash, they probably were not doing great work, right? Like, if as soon as you give them line of sight of the door, they never come back, I'm just not sure that you want those people in your organization, right? So, but what I was going to say earlier is that this notion of what worker demands are changing over time, and whether or not folks are asking for this in the future, I've thought about it as my theory of change, where you have leaders and folks who have taken a sabbatical have to take the time. If you're privileged enough to be able to take it, you have to take it. So that then you can have that transformative experience and value it such that you can input those policies into the organization, right? I mean, it is a privilege to be able to take a sabbatical on all the dimensions we spoke about, financial, psychological, right? But it's got to start somewhere. The change has to start somewhere. So if you have the privilege to do it, you should do it, and then you should talk about it, right? So that gives people the permission. It fights this notion of what we call worker devotion norm, where even if you have a policy in place, like vacation, like we were talking about earlier, you might not feel comfortable taking it because your boss doesn't take it. Yep. So that's one theory of change is top down, by leading by example. The second is just bubbling up, and more on the exemplar piece, like anyone who has taken a sabbatical, spreading the word. But I hear a lot about Gen Z or younger generations, and what we know from the data is that they value experiences, they value flexibility, they value mission over compensation. And so you can either pretend like that's not happening, or that that's not a valid way to view the world, or realize that that's what's coming.
That's right. That's right. And there's a cultural opportunity to be countercultural right now, and to say, here we're valuing people, and we're valuing the human being and what the human is after for their life, And, oh, by the way, that's going to make them better at the work that they do and the better work that we do. And they're going to be more committed then also to this culture that they are a part of.
Yeah, and I think about it as, because folks, both now and younger generations, value things like mission and purpose, not all companies can give like a really inspiring mission.
That's right.
with their product. And so I think the way that you can do that is by giving people a gift of their own time and space outside of work. And, some leaders might think that would make it more likely that the people don't come back because they're going to work on something. They're not going to want to come back and work on adhesives and glues, right? But actually, I think it builds loyalty in those employees who say, listen, like work enables me to do this both financially, and then also they're giving me time to spend time with family or spend time on a passion project. I want to go back to this company because there's a light at the end of the tunnel to take additional breaks and recharge.
I love it. Yeah. Are there some examples of some organizations? There were some best practices that you're seeing of organizations beginning to shift that and beginning to see that, hey, this is what's coming and that there's a cultural opportunity here. Are you seeing some things? Yeah,
I mean, one of the interesting things from doing the research was that I found so many companies have been doing it for a long time. McDonald's, I think, is like the first company on record since 1977 that gives their managers paid sabbaticals. You have tech companies like Adobe. You have biotech companies like Genentech, which is interesting because Genentech having a sabbatical policy has had this waterfall effect of forcing kind of startup biotech firms to offer sabbaticals because they know that they could always just like go and work for Genentech and you make more money and also get a sabbatical policy. So that's had a cool kind of ripple effect in the industry. I also talk about the field of consulting because I think that a lot of jobs are going to look more like consulting and going to look like more tech companies in the future, which is you have these like cycles where you have in consulting, you have a project and it lasts a certain amount of time. And when you're done with it, you're kind of off until you get staffed on another project. And so it's this cyclical aspect where you can work really, really hard. But when you're off, you're off. And so, a significant amount of consultants will opt to have their pay decrease by 20% in order to have 20% of their year off. It doesn't decrease the amount of like work and stress they have when they're on, but it gives them these blocks of uninterrupted time, and they're willing to take the pay cut because that extra, big time is extraordinarily valuable. Similarly, in tech, you have these product development cycles where you're all working towards some kind of product launch, product development, and then, it creates this natural inflection point to say, okay, we launched the product. Now, you can be the person that continues to maintain the product. You can move on to launch another product. But it's these like inflection points in work that I think as all of our work becomes more cyclical, it gives us this opportunity to like step back and, sub people in and out, have people learn from other teams, from other companies and other experiences to make that product even better when they come back.
No doubt. The listeners, again, they're going to connect with this idea, but I did a whole episode we're talking about the kind of work-life rhythm rather than work-life balance. And this idea that I think is showing up again generationally and what people value is this, and that I've never really liked the term balance, work-life balance anyway, because I've never met anybody where that's actually true. There's not equal time that you spend with your wife and your work. Like, we're not structured that way as a society. And so it's not balance, but it absolutely has an opportunity to be a rhythm to it. And a rhythm that we own, a rhythm that we partner with an organization and with a team to say, what's the best rhythm that puts me and puts us in position to be most successful? And we're not meant to be, back to the word recharge, is we're not meant to be computers that just you plug us in and we just go forever. We need times where we need to kind of get away and have a little bit of a recharge to then be able to fully. That's why we sleep. That's why we eat. That's why our bodies need this. Is there anything in there that resonates with you?
No, I think the only way to do it is to run two companies and sleep under your desk. And if you just work hard enough, you'll break straight through. Won't require sleep. Yeah, I mean, listen, I like this notion of rhythm. And, I'm, as with most people who have an idea, I'm like the worst at it. So I haven't taken a sabbatical in 8 years. I promised myself that I would do every 7 years. And the reality of life is that, I'm in this season of, having moved, started a new job, like finishing a book project, and like the rhythm's a little bit out of sync. But I know what kind of awaits me in sabbatical land the next time I go. And so I think when you have a chance to fully kind of cleanse, process, heal, you know that you need it because you've seen the filters and they need to be cleaned, right?
Yep.
And I think if you aren't taking that pause and you aren't kind of stepping back and analyzing what your life is like, you just don't know that you need it. One thing we noticed in our interviews is all these people had physical manifestations of job stress that they would just tell themselves was just part of life, right? Yep. Ulcers, eczema, trigger fingers, and back to that functional workaholism. You're just in the soup of this is what life and work is, and unless you can pull yourself up and get perspective of what else it could be, you won't, right?
Unless you can step back from the baggage claim and get out of the madness, it's hard to see it that way. And
totally.
So to be able to say, is this the way I want to travel? Is this the way that I want to move? And oh, by the way, is there a better way to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what this kind of challenging of conventional thinking and trying to think about optimizing for your life and optimizing for your work, that's where this fits in I think there's a better way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that I talk about, because it's not inconceivable. It's pretty obvious that vacations are great and a longer vacation would be better, right?
Everybody's hand went up, yeah.
Yeah. But there's this concept of this Aristotelian concept of metis. So it's knowledge that you get you can only get from experience, right? So like, how do you become a better sailor? It's not from like reading a book on sailing, right?
That's right.
And another special part about sabbaticals is it gives you enough time to actually run experiments, right? Like, it's one thing to zoom out and say like, what are other possible lives that are out there? I'm going to go do that life. It's another thing to say like, okay, what are some possible ways of living? I'm going to try those on for size for a month or something. And then I'm going to, with that experience, that lived experience, make an informed decision around what hypothesis I should test next. And so it takes it away from this, like, a vacation. You're doing something,
right, versus
actually like being a certain way for a period in your life, and figuring out, okay, do I want to continue to be that, or do I want to be something else? It gives you more kind of autonomy and choice over it.
Yeah, so absolutely. And again, that resonates with me is because I feel like that's part of that practice is it's just allowing yourself to step back and say, let me have some margin, let me grow for a little while in some different directions, that there doesn't have to be a game plan for it. Mm-hmm. Like, allow some of that. I know we're almost at our time, but let me ask this question, because there's undoubtedly there's somebody out there that's listening to this that, we've been in some turbulent times. We've been in, the world is certainly interesting. We already named a lot that happens in workplaces and just that busyness, workaholic kind of culture that we're in. But we're also been in very divisive times, political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, wars, like intense issues and things. What somebody who's just feeling, oh my goodness, like the day-to-day getting through my life and my work is just what advice do you give to somebody who's feeling that internally?
A couple things. First is I would encourage folks to zoom out and look at the past 10 years, or at least the past 6 years, and ask yourself, how many moments during that time have you not felt like that? Has the world not felt like that? Have you not felt like that? And, I think then put the ball forward and say, like, is it likely that things will change? Is it likely that things will change in the direction that I would like, that will create more space and ability to be, have autonomy in the future? I think that the world is probably not going to give you the perfect opportunity to take time off. And so you have to be proactive and you have to go out and grab it. Now, this notion of like, okay, this guy said to take a sabbatical sometime in the future, it's not very tangible. It's not very specific. And so what I would encourage folks to do is, 30 minutes at a cafe, no phone, no music, just a journal or blank sheet of paper, and fast forward to the future and say, like, what are some things that you would regret not doing with your life? Right? Like, what are some things, think about people speaking at your eulogy, or think about, your grandkids bouncing on your knee. Like, what are some things you'd like to tell about the story of your life that you have not had time or the ability to do so far? And write those down. It sounds ridiculous, but write it down, sit with the boredom of it, 30 minutes. And then you have to really ask yourself, like, how are you going to do those things given your current life? And you might have a great solution on how to do it. But I think most people will look at that and say, actually, doing a lot of these things is incompatible with how I've lived my life so far. And if I can just make a little bit of space in the context of a 40, 50-year career, taking 6 months off is like 1%. Just a little bit of space to actually tick off some of those items from your bucket list. And then it starts to become concrete. It's not like, how do I take a sabbatical? But it's, how do I build a tree fort with my kids? How do I go on like a road trip with my wife? And then you actually start making it more concrete, and the seed of that idea starts growing such that it becomes an idea you can't stop thinking about. And that's the world we want to live in, is just remembering that we have these human yearnings, these human desires for things that are not productive or not work-based, that we have to give a little airtime to. But it requires attention. And right now, when the world is just kind of intense and nonstop and intrusive, we lose our attention and we lose our intention to make choices for our lives. And so we just encourage people to try to fight back against that.
Yeah, my listeners will know that I've referenced Mary Oliver's poem, where she talks about the soul exists and it's built entirely out of attentiveness. And I've talked about what that means for us as human beings, but also what does that mean as a leader? What does that mean for the kind of cultures that we're trying to create? Is what does we give our attention to, our focus to, our hearts to, right? And so, you made the statement, like, and that, which is great advice, to go to that coffee shop, to take the 30 minutes, and you said it sounds ridiculous. My response to that would be, it sounds ridiculous to me that we wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And what my encouragement to people is we ought to be taking time for our lives, but also for our teams, for our organizations. And in my opinion, the best in the world right now are thinking creatively about, how do I engage the minds and hearts of my people? And how do I help them live those lives that they want at their eulogy, or they want at the end of their life, to say, I did that, and it's in the best interests of us as human beings, but also as organizations, to say, how do we help cultivate a culture that honors that? And in doing so, things get better.
Yeah. The chapter 12 in my book talks all about the case kind of for companies, right? And so putting that business hat on. And then the second hat that you alluded to there is, as a manager, as a human being managing other human beings or leading other human beings, no one's going to remember the fact that one quarter you achieved 105% of goal. But think of what you could enable your people to do if you gave them a little time and space to really like blossom into who they want to be. Like, that's how you will live forever in their minds and really feel like you're an enabling, compassionate person. And I believe, I don't have the data on this, but I believe that's going to result in a much stronger organization and performance anyway. But worst case scenario, you're a good person.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it firsthand. I'll just say that in the organizations that I'm fortunate to support and to be a partner with, that as we develop this kind of thinking, acting, and interacting, a dynamic culture where we start to think about, how do we approach our life, our teams, how do we lead, how we do what we do matters, the results, the business results follow. And so, two big companies right now I'm working with, a turnover in the last few years has been cut in half. What's the impact economically, let alone on people's lives?
Yeah.
Massive.
Yep.
So when we do this and we think about it differently, we not only experience it for our own life that of what that feeling is when you took a sabbatical, but also you start to empower other people, and the organization starts to get better.
Mm-hmm. That's the world we're aiming for. So this is the purpose of kind of setting up the sabbatical project to really tell these stories so that it's not the exception, it's more of the norm. You don't have to use the fancy word sabbatical. It can just be, I'm, taking care of my family for 3 months, or I'm, going on the Appalachian Trail. And, in the book, Big Time Off, I talk a lot about, here's some examples, here's inspiration, permission, and a blueprint on how to do it. So that's the world we're looking to inhabit.
Well, buddy, we could talk about this forever, but I appreciate you coming on, and I really sincerely love the research you're doing, love the spirit of the work that you're doing, and again, clearly I'm somebody that believes in this, that this is not only good for human beings, but is going to be good for the future of work. So appreciate you coming on the pod.
All right. Great to be here and great to meet you.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks out there to listeners. I hope today's episode got you thinking in some ways. I hope it breathes some good oxygen into you. And I hope it helps you think about that temperature that you're aiming to set in your life and your work. And I'll put more in the show notes today about DJ, djdidonna.com and the sabbaticalproject.org. You can learn more about that. We'll put it in the show notes. But I hope it gets you thinking about what is that future that you're trying to create. And how could you bring out the best in the people around you and support their dreams? And, oh, by the way, perhaps performance will get better. So I hope today's episode got you thinking in that way. Again, don't forget to subscribe, to rate, to review, to share, all the things to help amplify these messages further in the world so that they aren't a secret and they can be shared with people around. And lastly, I'll just remind us all to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen.